Good morning, everyone. My name is Matthew Carvalho. I am joining in from Washington, D.C., and I really want to thank you all for joining us for this really important discussion. I apologize for our delay. We had a bit of conflicting webinars this morning, but we're so thankful to have you all. Like I said, my name is Matthew. I am a joint research fellow between the Sunway Center for Planetary Health at Sunway University and the O'Neill Institute for National and Global Health Law at Georgetown University Law Center. But I joined you here as the co-founder and operational lead of Global Health Governance as Public Service, or GHGAPS. Global Health Governance as Public Service is a program that we started here at Georgetown University in 2022, designed to fill the gap in training and building capacity around global health governance, particularly for youth and students. We began to see a bit of an opportunity to build educational programs around the global governance world in particular, and to be able to train and motivate young advocates and students to be able to more effectively engage in this space. And as such, to celebrate World Health Day and to be able to kind of move forward progress in this space, we thought this was a great opportunity to have a webinar about lessons learned from the youth space on governing for healthy people and planet. We're kicking off Global Public Health Week with this panel, and we're delighted to partner with the World Federation of Public Health Associations to put this on with an exciting panel on governance for planetary health. This is part of a larger series that we're hoping to conduct leading up to the ECOSOC Youth Forum that is happening in New York City in just a few weeks, and we look forward to potentially seeing some of you there. This discussion will showcase the role of scholars and advocates by discussing the efforts made on the national level all the way up to the global level. I'm thrilled to have some close colleagues and friends joining on this panel session to be able to discuss some of the most pivotal conversations around governance for planetary health and how we really build capacity to move forward governance across all spectrums to be able to affect planetary well-being. So I'm delighted to have four lovely counterparts with me. Arif Zaini of Sunway University, Alina Forsyth of Monash University, Orly Villaspesa of Youth Negotiators Academy, and Ina Kafunda, who is former graduate of the O'Neill Institute for National and Global Health Law and now a global health law scholar in Zambia. So with that, I'd actually like to go to my close friend and colleague Arif first, because I'm not sure how many of you know this, but Malaysia is doing incredible work on the planetary health side of things. They are the first country to be initiating a national planetary health action plan. And after the 2024 Planetary Health Summit and sixth annual meeting hosted at Sunway University in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia has positioned itself to be a leading actor, particularly at national policy implementation of planetary health. So, Arif, this National Planetary Health Action Plan brings together all ministries in an attempt for cohesion and coherence to amplify unified and harmonized approaches for planetary well-being. So, for our webinar participants who may not know as much about the action plan, I can only imagine what a lift this must be. In your opinion, how has this action plan come to be, and what have been some of the obstacles that the government has faced in implementing this plan? And what might other countries learn if they were to try to implement something similar? Please, Arif.
Thank you, Matthew, my good friend, everyone. My name is Arif from Sunway Center for Planetary Health, where I work in strategic communication with our strategy, policy, and advocacy team. And my role is basically to serve as a bridge between our center and the government. And that has put me right in the thick of some of the most ambitious efforts that has taken to put planetary health at the heart of national governance. I think one of the boldest steps Malaysia has taken is developing the first ever National Planetary Health Action Plan, which we hope brings together ministries that have traditionally operated in silos, whether it's health, whether it's in education, environment, and maybe economy, into something that are coordinated and a national effort. I think, Matthew, the ambition of having an action plan might um, sounds great on paper, but what does it actually take to make it real? I think one of the biggest challenge, firstly, would breaking the silos. Um, Ministries are used to working within their own mandates, timelines, and cultures. And what planetary health demands is fundamentally um, disruptive, and it requires us to rewire system to work together. And what we have learned that policy documents are not enough. you know um, you need real relationships, you need trust, time, and a lot of bridge building. And I think my role as strategic communications often felt less like a communicator and more like a translator, figuring out how to align narratives across ministries who had different priorities, but a shared stake in Malaysia's future. And I think, Matthew, the second one that we learn the importance of speaking the right language. I think planetary health can be abstract, you know. It's a new concept for many, especially in Malaysia. So part of our job was reframing it. For example, with Ministry of Finance, planetary health can be about a long-term risk and resilience. Perhaps with Ministry of Health, it's about non-communicable diseases and air quality. So you don't just push narrative, you tailor it. And it sort of become a bespoke narrative. And I think strategic communication became a strategic tool. Um, and maybe last one, Matthew, I think there's a need to show a visible wins early. Um, it means that, policy momentum is fragile. And I think here in Malaysia, I think one of other achievement other than National Planetary Health Action Plan, we managed to embedded planetary health in our 30th Malaysian plan and included with higher education blueprint. And we are still waiting for the parliament to approve. And it will be announced by our prime minister. But, to get there, we had to prove the value of this work. And, it starts with community, and we start small. For example, we have done work in one of the city in Malaysia, located in Perak. We call the project as Ipoh Donut City, which helped bring the concept to life at the local level. And we think that the leaders saw people were engaged, um, and data integrated, and results starts to show, and it was easier to get more buy-in. um and I think what other people could learn from other organization, firstly, start small. You build trust, you tailor your message, try to celebrate the progress even it's not perfect. And at the end of the day, we are talking about governance, and governance is about people and not just processes. And planetary health, try to remind us of that every single day. I think that's the answer to that question, Matthew.
Thank you so much, Arif. And I really appreciate your comments on strategic communication and just how much bolstering the work that we are doing from the governance perspective in community is so pivotal. It's why with the Planetary Health Roadmap and Action Plan that we launched in Malaysia, we put communication as so pivotal to what we do to implement this work moving forward. And I congratulate you and the team in Malaysia for everything to be able to move this forward. And I think it ties in well to our next panelist, Alina Forsyth, talking about how to bring some of these conversations that are happening on the ground to life within global negotiations. Alina, you served as the 2024 G20 Youth Head Delegate for Australia. And the G20 negotiations, which differ from a lot of these other negotiations, they're not thematically centralized. You're kind of talking about a lot of things under a variety of umbrellas. And it tackles a lot of these intersecting issues with representation from various ministries of countries that are part of the G20 partnership. So I'm curious, how did you bring together your role as not only a student at Monash University, but also an advocate to serve as a young diplomat representing your country in conversations surrounding global governance issues?
Yeah, introduce myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Alina, and like Matthew said, I served as Australia's head delegate to the G20 Youth Forum last year. Um, yeah, I think there are a lot of ways you can go about it. I think the biggest thing for me was making sure that I was aware and accurate with who I was representing. So, with the G20 Youth Forum, we met with the Australian government. You actually don't have to represent your federal government. So that gave me the leeway to discuss with young people around Australia and learn from communities that who often don't get a space in big negotiation areas such as this and advocate for their voices. So I consulted with youth across the country. You can't ever make everyone happy, obviously, when you're representing everyone. But I tried to consult with as many people as I possibly can, myself and the rest of the G20 youth team. There was 5 of us in total. And the most important thing for me was to elevate the voices of those traditionally marginalised or not welcome in spaces. So in Australia, that's Indigenous Australians and Torres Strait Islander peoples and people from rural communities or those that may not have completed tertiary or high school education. Yeah, so the topic that I was negotiating was reform of the global governance system, which is incredibly broad for people aged 18 to 30 to sort of try and advocate for, the G20's, most of the world youth to try and advocate for. So I really focused on what Australian youth were passionate about. And I think as my role as an advocate, that was the one thing that obviously you can't cover everything, but I wanted to try and cover as much as I possibly could, the key areas that Australian youth were passionate about. So that was including a big thing was youth engagement. A lot of Australians, we have our federal election coming up in the next month. A lot of Australians don't feel represented or accurate. They don't feel represented or welcomed by the current policies or on either sides of, all sorts of parties. So my big thing to focus on was youth engagement, which was ensuring that G20 leaders are reminded that there are pathways for youth engagement. The Secretary General of the UN has released policy briefs on youth engagement and to reminding them that follow these, like they're good guidelines. They're a start of where we can begin to get proper engagement and accountability. At the end of the day, policies is representing the people that they're supposed to represent accurately, the people that they have to serve. And for Australian youth, that's despite making up close to about 50% of the voting population this coming election, is still something that we struggle with. So that's something I wanted to get forward. And I found it was universal. It's not something that was in Australia. I think youth across the globe and everyone on the panel can probably agree that, it's something that we all struggle with in getting a voice across and being taken seriously, I think. And another thing was escalating warfare and types of systems and warfare systems that are permissible. A lot of Australian youth have been really vocal and active about that the last couple of years. And taxation and cost of living, which I think across the board in our current climate is quite volatile and extreme. And in Australia, particularly our tax laws, lots of Australians believe that, it's sided more towards those that are older and already have jobs, and that the younger people aren't going to be around for as much. So I think how I go about ensuring that I balance everything appropriately, I think was just trying to do the best that I possibly could have. I think representation is key, and I think I although not something that we create a communique and we present to G20 world leaders you know, some countries or some states their delegates go and meet with their policymakers and present it to them. There's never a guarantee in these situations that, you know, the state leaders are going to read these recommendations. But the importance for me was to take this as seriously as possible, you know, do my duty of representing Australian youth. And I think there are so many negotiations, and there were many negotiation tracks such as climate change and future of work. But the importance of the G20 and the G20 Youth Forum, I think something like that, even though it covers topics, you know, same as the World Health Assembly and at COP and the IMF and World Bank meetings, it covers the intersection of health and climate and all those things. I think the importance of this is that it's a designated space for young people, which is so rare within our communities and our governance systems, is that it is like just a conference itself set up entirely for young people. And, you know, we have like Model UN competitions and all those sorts of things, but actual engagement groups like the Y20 are quite rare. So I really wanted to take it as much as possible. And that's why I think that whilst we have obviously the World Health Assembly and COP, that the importance of youth spaces and making intergenerational policy that's accurate and representable of the people that you're trying to advocate for is really, really important. And that's, yeah, I think that's how I went about it. And I wanted to ensure that I did my best. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alina. And I think that's a fantastic segue as well, because a lot of what GH GAPS, but also the Youth Negotiators Academy has tried to do is build some of those youth engagement spaces and make sure that we bring underrepresented populations, particularly youth populations from different parts of the world into some of these global governance spaces, and make sure we're really taking a global to local and local to global approach as to how we negotiate and how we advocate. So I really, really appreciate your insights on that front. And that means I will pass it to Orly next. Orly, Arif and Alina have kind of set the stage with their own perspectives on national and global governance for planetary health. The Youth Negotiators Academy, YNA, works very much at this nexus, training young activists to represent the efforts of national governments in these global negotiations. And this last year in particular was a bit of a milestone for you because you launched your first ever training with the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, branching out from the Climate Change Forum, and you're planning to launch future programs similar to this moving forward in 2026. So my question for you, in implementing your training program with the Desertification Convention, what did you learn as you harmonized your trainings kind of across these different negotiations? And how do you plan to take these trainings into different negotiating fora moving forward?
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for inviting me. And it's great to be hearing from others on all these challenges we're facing. So maybe a little bit of background before replying to your question. So I'm community enabler at the Youth Negotiators Academy. And I think even like this role name is important in our vision because I'm not community manager, it's really enabler, meaning that community is really at the center of all our programs. So my role is to create a safe space for our youth negotiators. Not only we train them, but we also make sure that they are taking care of themselves in the whole process. We also make sure they connect between themselves because, as I said, community is also important for us in this whole space. And I imagine my colleagues here also saw the importance of having a wider community to also survive a bit in that space, in the global governance area or arena. And one of the things we also do is that we connect our youth negotiators to the wider ecosystem because we see things working in systems. We don't work in silos. We try to avoid what Arif was saying, exactly how it works with ministries. It's also true in the COP spaces. Lots of countries have their own interests. And our goal is to make sure that the young people that are entering this space are not reproducing the same mistakes as ancestors. So yeah, this is a bit about my role, but also the vision at the Youth Negotiators Academy, because as I said, our goal is to connect young people We don't only train them, we give them, of course, all the content related course on negotiations in the UNFCCC process and now the UNCCD, as you mentioned. But for us, learning about power dynamics and also trauma-informed dynamics are super important, because all of these dynamics have a huge influence on the mental health of our youth negotiators when they are in that space. And of course, if they don't tackle that, they might not be as efficient and might not connect as much between themselves to find solutions to our major world problems. So I think that was important maybe to give us context, and then to answer your question. So of course, we launched the desertification program last year, and it went super well. We had 100 actually, it was exactly 100 participants joining us. So now our community is more than 500 young people that we train and that are informed about mental health issues as well in those spaces. And what we've learned throughout all of this process is that, of course, the content between the conventions on climate and on land desertification are very different. Negotiation cultures are also different. For example, the climate COP is, of course, the most known. It has a lot of political attention. A lot of people go there. But for the land desertification COP, it's way more or less known. So maybe it's also easier for people to, oh, sorry, my cat is coming here. It's also less easier for people to find agreements because they have less political attention. So of course, those processes are different, but what we saw and what I see in my role is that one of the biggest lessons is that all of these processes have similar mental health issues, conflict-related traumas, and barriers to youth engagement as a whole. So when we replicated our training, we actually didn't change much in the community engagement aspect, because all of these traumas and dynamics are very true in both processes. And for the next program we will be launching next year, the biodiversity one, we're probably going to also do a similar approach with intergenerational collaboration to also work on mental health. And we also have all of these sessions where we work with externals to learn from the old generations, but also we invite younger, even activists, to also share their learnings. So this is a bit of our model, let's say, and how we see how we can make sure global governance is more interconnected. Also because, as Arif said, global governance is about people. So we really need to make sure that these people are taken care of and that we avoid burnout, as it's something that is also very present in all those spaces. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Orly, and congratulations on all the work that YNA has done. It's been fantastic to watch your engagement and your ability to bring voices that otherwise would not be in these spaces into these global fora. And I appreciate your insights, particularly on how some of these dynamics are very cross-cutting. And one thing that we focus on at Global Health Governance as Public Service is the soft skills that you need to engage in a lot of these spaces that go across different fora, whether it be the World Health Assembly, the Climate Conference of the Parties, the Desertification COP, the Biodiversity COP. A lot of these skills and a lot of these strategies for advocacy can apply through a variety of spaces, and building some of that systemic integration is just so pivotal to be able to bring people into these spaces. So I thank you for your work on that front. And then last but not least, we have my good friend Ina Kafunda on the call as well. Ina is a global health law specialist and has done a lot of work on building capacity in relation to public health at both the national level in Zambia, as well as through global negotiations. And I think this is a good tie-in to what Orly was saying in relation to bringing some of the local conversations and local issues into global governance fora. And I wanted to touch on just one case study, if you will, Ina, and that's the pandemic treaty that we've been seeing negotiated at the World Health Organization. I'm sure since the World Federation of Public Health Associations is co-hosting this webinar, there are a lot of people who are watching right now who may have followed the pandemic treaty negotiations. We are heading up on our last round before the hopeful adoption of the pandemic treaty at the 78th World Health Assembly in Geneva this May. But one of the sticking points is actually an article on One Health and some text on One Health, which sits under the larger umbrella of planetary health, the One Health approach to try to bring together the environment, animal, human health nexus. And it's been interesting seeing this as one of the main sticking points left, because it's emphasized the difficulties in de-siloing the international order for global and planetary health. So Ina, in your opinion, what can young advocates for planetary health who aim to work at the intersection of some of these cross-cutting issues learn from these negotiations on the pandemic treaty? And what cautions would you share with those trying to break down these institutional divides?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Matthew, for inviting me to be part of this conversation. It's really been a good conversation so far. I'm learning a lot. Just to give some context, this year during the pandemic treaty negotiation, there was a word that spiked a 3-hour negotiation debate, and that's because other people thought it was a binding word. So I just wanted to provide some context on this is what we're dealing with in global health governance. So the pandemic treaty negotiations have been, for me, both very informative, but also an aspect of sobering as well, particularly around the contentious issues like you've brought out for the One Health. One lesson for me that remains pretty clear, and also for us young planetary health advocates to take note of, is that global governance is really inherently political. Science is necessary, but unfortunately, it's not sufficient. The decisions are really shaped by power, by geopolitics, and also by, competing priorities and institutional interests. We've seen some resistance to have a strong Article 5 on One Health, which shows how difficult, and this has shown how difficult it is to really bridge the gap between, health, environment, agriculture. Like everybody is operating in compartments, everybody is operating in silos. So for us to be able to really push the agenda, there has to be an understanding on the legal mandates. What are the legal mandates? What are the financial mandates for each critical department in the negotiation? So really, for young people, I would say that as we are looking at this negotiations in the future, advocacy for planetary health is not sufficient. It's not only advocacy and bringing an awareness, but it's also like what Amref said, trying to bring different different collaborators to the table so that everybody is speaking the same language. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves not communicating and not driving the point because we are working in silos. There's really a critical need for cross-sectorial collaboration and also just an improvement in making sure that as we are having these discussions, we're also stressing the issue of accountability as we move forward. So for me, I think those have been some of the critical lessons that I have learned and would like to pass on.
Thank you so much, Ina, and hopefully we get it across the finish line in the coming month, and we're able to get kind of that treaty through.
Yes, we are in the last week this week, so we're keeping our fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, to say the least. Thank you so much, Ina. So now that we've kind of heard preliminary interventions from all four of our panelists, I'd like to pose a question to you all, and please feel free to chime in whenever you choose. One of the main components of this panel is lessons learned, and I think it's an intriguing but important title to have early career researchers represented at, because I think a lot of the times when we think about lessons learned, we think people who have been in these spaces 20, 30 years reflecting wisdom back onto the youth, which is important and significant within its own right. But I also believe that learning these lessons from youth actively engaging in the field, whether it be with national ministries, in global negotiations, in community and capacity building within itself, is just as important and just as powerful, particularly in motivating other youth to engage in these spaces and showing that there is an opportunity for youth and students to participate, even at our age, at this point in our lives. So to all four of you, what lessons can we take away from your own experiences to be more holistic and integrative in our educational understanding of global governance for planetary health? What lessons would you give back to other students and young advocates who may be on this call or who may be listening to this after the fact as they begin to carve out their own journeys in these governance spaces?
I can maybe go first. I would say don't wait till you feel ready or accomplished enough, or that you understand everything, because global governance is such a it's a moving part. It moves all the time depending on, you know, what's going on in current affairs. And I think you don't need to be ready. You don't need to feel like you have the entire system, whether that's planetary health, you understand everything that's going on, or you're all the way across all the COP negotiations. You don't need to have everything understood. If you have an area that you're incredibly passionate about, and that you have that one area that you're focusing on, get involved, start already. There are so many youth voices that don't have the opportunity to be heard properly, and I think it's so vital that all youth are informed of what's going on and if you have an opinion, you should talk about it. And so many people that I've met, you know, the G20 negotiations ourselves, none of us felt fully ready, or, you know, imposter syndrome hits really, really hard. And I think it's because when we look at these global governance spaces, we may see like one or two people under the age of 30. Everyone you see is like, you know, in their middle age or older. And it's not accurate of our systems. And, you know, as a young person, you have such a diverse opinion that your politicians aren't going to understand, no matter how much they claim they do. They're never going to fully get it. And I think especially connecting to planetary health, you know, health and climate, they don't fully comprehend how, you know, terrifying it is to be faced with the future that you're currently faced with. And they don't understand the drive and the urgency that a lot of us do feel, that like, oh, this is our planet, we have to deal with it. So don't wait to feel ready. You're already ready. And once you find communities of young people, you realize you don't have to, it's not just you trying to fix the whole world and trying to take on global governance and shape these systems yourself. There are so many people like you. And that's why youth spaces are so valuable. They provide not only skills and training, but there's so much, as Aurelie was talking about, mental health well-being that is provided to you that you need to keep going, especially in volatile and, like Ina was saying, politically motivated, unfortunately, spaces like global governance. Yeah, don't feel like you have to be ready. You will find young people along the way, and you build each other up, and it's most of the time more impact than you could have ever imagined. And then don't get scared along the way either. Keep going. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alina. I think that's a great way to encapsulate kind of what everyone's been talking about. And I fully get it too on the imposter syndrome side. I feel like it's something we all kind of feel all the time in these spaces. So I really, really appreciate that comment.
Yeah, probably I would go next. I would say prepare, and don't be scared to have cross-disciplinary knowledge. Yes, you could be a lawyer, but you could be a scientist too. You could understand something about science, or you could understand something about the environment. So don't be scared to have cross-disciplinary knowledge and taking those courses so that you are better prepared. Yes, it is intimidating, but I want to believe that it's less intimidating if you prepare yourself, if you read very widely. In the world that we're living in right now, you can get a short course, I bet, on anything. Anything. You will Google it and find an answer, and just make sure that even as a young person, you are highly knowledgeable and you are not scared to understand areas that are not particularly in your field, like law. Everybody is kind of apprehensive about the law, but it's really very basics. So please, but my encouragement would be, try and get cross-disciplinary knowledge so that you over prepare yourself, and that will boost your confidence as you're sitting in these rooms.
Thank you so much, Ina. And I think that's the beauty of planetary health, right? We're kind of trying to do this all across the board and bring all these different things together. So as much educational understanding we can build kind of across these different fora, law included. I'm a law student. I'm with you on that front. Is definitely helpful to be able to move that forward. Arif or Orly, if you have a comment as well as we move forward.
Sure. Lesson learned, I think, I can point out like 3 points here. The first one is education, Matthew. Governance is messy, it's not linear, it's a system based, and it forces you to confront with trade-offs. So I think the most strategic way is to educate our generation and the next to lead in this space. And I think in order to prepare them for this kind of complexity, we shouldn't shield them from it. Um, at the center, we are learning this in real time. One of our most meaningful projects, the one that I just mentioned, is the Ipoh Donut City, where it wasn't just about a policy exercise. It brought together urban planners, economists, environmentalists, and the community, and we even had students involved. And I think um, with them, they were not just observing governance; they were living in it. And I think that kind of experiential and problem-based learning is what we need. And then the second point is, we have to talk about values, right? Everyone can be leaders, right, Matthew? Even if you are a crook person, you can still become a leaders. So a lot of governance education only focuses on structures and institutions, but we didn't talk about, cultural humility. We didn't talk about integrity. We didn't talk about compassion. You know, a leader should be morally grounded. They should ask questions like, who gets left behind? What's the long-term impact of this tariff? I don't know. You know, you have to you have to embed ethics into education, which I think it's essential. And I think finally is mainstreaming. Um, we were lucky at national level where Malaysia, our country, believes in us. Now, in Malaysia's higher education blueprint includes planetary health and sustainability as one of our pillars. This is huge because in Malaysia's higher education blueprint, it's sort of like the road for the next 5 years in the country. So imagine, planetary health and sustainability is in it. It means we are no longer treating planetary health as a niche topic here in Malaysia. It's becoming a baseline for future professionals where, medical students gonna learn about it, engineering students gonna learn about it, business students gonna learn about it here in Malaysia. So I think maybe to summarize everything, if we want to integrative governance, we need to integrate education, one that blends science and system thinking with values and action, and one that challenge our students and the youth to think deeply, act courageously, and can work across discipline. And that is how we want to build our leaders here in Malaysia. Thank you, Matthew.
And maybe then to build on what Aris just said, we work at the Youth Negotiators Academy with a concept of good ancestorship, meaning that whatever you're doing now, whatever initiatives you're doing, it's important to look at the long term and how you will be the ancestor of tomorrow. What will be your legacy, and yeah, what can you do now to build this legacy that you can now envision? And one of the panelists we had in one of our session, he actually talked about this imposter syndrome and legitimacy that is very present, right, in the youth engagement space. And he remembered us of this quote from Kofi Annan, which I really liked, and I think it's very linked to our discussion now, which is you're never too young to lead and never too old to learn. And I think this is crucial in everything we do. And it's also linked to this good ancestorship concept. So yeah, I would say this is one of my biggest lessons learned from the past month I've been at YNA, that you have a voice here. You can do a lot actually. And if you do it in community, it might be even better. That's why I also encourage people to experience really like global governance. If you can speak with people that are in the field, if you can go to COP, some organization fund young people to go, because I think all of these dynamics that we've been talking about, power dynamics, trauma dynamics, you can really feel them when you're in that space. They can be a bit theoretical when you're not in there, but when you're in the space, it's like very vivid, and it's also motivating to go there, and because you see it and you want to really tackle it because you see it so closely. So yeah, I would encourage to try to experience it as much as possible. And yeah, and for me, the human factor is very key in all of this. So if you want to build on your soft skills, I think it's also crucial. Try to speak with people that are culturally diverse. Yeah, confront your opinions. I mean, those are things that will really help you moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your insightful comments and reflections on this space. I think it's really, being someone who's been in this space for a few years now, I think it's really refreshing to be able to bring together young advocates and young activists in this field, because we need each other in a lot of ways, to be able to push forward and to be able to motivate each other and reflect on the collective power that we really do have to engage in this space. And what Orly said, and I think Arif tied on as well, once you set foot in these spaces, once you educate yourself, the theoretical component of global governance or national governance becomes real, and you start to be able to see how these mechanisms function, and just how, particularly as a young person, you can push those mechanisms in a way to bring forward the goals you hope to achieve. So I really appreciate all of your comments on that front, and thank you for your candor in being able to discuss these things with us today. At Global Health Governance as Public Service, GH Gaps, one of the things we focus on, calling it GH Gaps was intentional. to a certain extent, because one thing that we try to do, and I think YNA is very similar in this regard, is we try to fill the gaps in these spaces, and we try to teach some of the skills that you may not know you need until you're in the middle of a networking reception or a bilateral meeting or a negotiation, and you may not be necessarily prepared in those moments. And those are not things that necessarily translate to a classroom, like I was mentioning before. And I'm delighted that we've had some organizational partners to try to move this forward, including I will give a shout out to the Sunway Center for Planetary Health, their national GH Gaps program that they are launching this year in country with us. But to our panelists, I really wanted to ask you all, because you've had some ability to train youth or be youth to engage in these spaces. What are some of the main gaps you had in preparing to engage in governance spaces, and how would you like to see those gaps addressed by educational programs moving forward? Maybe 1 to 2 minute comments from you all.
Maybe I can jump in. So one of the major gaps for us, because we work with 80 different nationalities across our programs, and maybe more in the coming years. So it's really intercultural understanding, how to empathize with others that are very different from you, have different cultures, religions, way of thinking, how to step back and listen to others as well. So all of this is linked to listening techniques that we also teach during our programs. And it's not easy at the beginning, let's say. And that's why it's also fun, like to see how different cultures approach those kind of spaces. I mean, I found it fun. So there's a lot of learning, of course, behind all of that. And then another maybe, skill will be to work, of course, on your own emotional resilience, which is not easy to do alone, of course. So what we do, we do sessions that are called community workshops. So we work together on those kind of things, and we also have a trauma therapist that works with us. So yeah, those are the things that I think are also very cool at YNA that we do to try to make all of these spaces also more human.
Yeah, I think I find, because Matthew and I, we experienced this together. So I find this questions kind of fun to answer. I think one of the first gaps that we noticed were the lack of exposure to real policy dynamics. You can study global frameworks in a classroom, but it doesn't teach you how policy are negotiated. Who really holds influence, how to build coalition for change. We need to move beyond theory and create more opportunities for the youth to embed in real policy processes. Internships, youth observerships. I think, and that's why we at the center really support GH Gaps, because it trains you with all these values. And then secondly, we rarely talk about communications and confidence. What I mean is, I think like everyone else here, we have similar experience where we sat in the rooms with senior officials or ministers, and sometimes you questions whether we will belong there, not because some of us are not capable, but maybe because you were not trained to speak in that language or navigate in that space. So I think we need more platforms where young people can practice, even fail, but at least to build the confidence and to contribute meaningfully. And maybe another thing that for me personally really important is interpersonal humility. um Governance is not just about knowing the system, It's about being able to work with people from very different backgrounds, ideologies, and experiences. It takes empathy. It takes you to listen, and those are the leadership values that need to be exercised early and need to be trained. So I think if we could redesign how we prepare youth and the next generation for global governance, I think I would say grounded, experiential, and deeply human, that would challenge young people to build knowledge but also character. Because if we want to govern for both people and planet, I think we need a generation that is both um, bold and humble, uh, technical and ethical, and perhaps confidence and curious. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Arif. Ina and Alina, please, if you have maybe 30, 45-second closing thoughts.
Of course, yeah. I think that accessibility to education and understanding governance is so complicated, right? Understanding how negotiations function, or reading policy briefs, or declarations, or those sorts of things, they're so complicated, and quite often the message is quite simple, and I think there's a space missing between understanding what these spaces do and being a complete beginner. There needs to be a transition period of, this is how you understand a briefing, or this is how negotiations take place. It's not around a big room. It's like it's in the little back room where there's like 3 other main policymakers, and those sorts of things need to be more accessible. The other thing I would say is just this access to opportunities for young people is missing in general. So many opportunities are unpaid. Young people have to either they have to prioritize wanting to expand governance systems and make it more accessible, or they have to just focus on oh, I need to make enough money, I need to focus on work, I can't do this, and they're picking between human rights, and it's just a deeply unethical situation. So I think there needs to be more education for people that aren't beginners, but aren't experts either. There needs to be a broader range, and there needs to be way more. There are lots of youth opportunities, but they need to be more proper, structurally mechanized ones that allow young people to have the goodness of their current life, and not sacrifice things for trying to get their point and their community's points across.
Yeah, Matthew, for me, I think just very quickly, 2 key things that kind of was a gap for me. And the first one is, coming from a technical background, I really struggle with the real politicking in global governance. So I think there has to be a way in which this is simulated to some extent, just understanding the timing, the framing, and the narrative strategy would be very helpful and very essential in trying to frame how you show up in this discussion. And the second one for me is coming from Africa. I think it would be really, really helpful to invest in regional hubs where all these things that we've been discussing today are taught, spaces where people from the global south are able to build their confidence, to teach them not only what to say, what to read, but how to say it, when to say it, and where to say it that will matter and make a difference. I think those are the key things for me. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And Nina, I think that's a very powerful note to end on. So I really appreciate all of your engagements on this front, and all of the engagements I know you will continue to do to move forward all of these spaces. So I want to take a moment. I want to thank the World Federation of Public Health Associations and the Global Health Governance as Public Service teams for putting this webinar together. This will not be the last discussion. We will be moving forward to the ECOSOC Youth Forum in New York City. If any of you are there, please feel free to join us, as well as the World Health Assembly in Geneva, Switzerland, later next month. So I just want to take a moment, and I want to thank all of our panelists for investing their time and their care in this conversation, and for all of our participants on the webinar as well.